You have been here also last year for a first edition of the conference that we hosted here in Villa Guastavillani, and then we met Theodore again in Manhattan during a visit of our students, the Ferrari EMBA Executive MBA class, where we had the opportunity to see more about applications in the industry of AI. I think this is a great opportunity for the business school community. I know there are colleagues and students also connected in streaming. Many reasons. The school is an interdisciplinary school, so anytime we have the chance to bring inside our discussion and learning different perspectives and disciplines is always a very valuable contribution. And obviously because you are touching a topic that is becoming more and more hot in the industry, in the society, in the academics, and I think that given the level of speakers tonight and the companies and the academic institutions that are represented, I don't want to steal any more time, and I'd like to leave the stage to Theodore, and thank you very, very much for giving us this opportunity and joining us tonight. I hope you will enjoy the conversation. Theodore.
Max, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be back and enjoy the Italian hospitality. And we all know how much Italy has given the world in terms of culture and automotive, in the automotive industry, design and so on. So I think it'll be great discussion tonight to explore what Italy and the community here that can contribute to the development and implementation of AI-based technology, disruptive technology in practice. So I'm Theodore Grancherov, as Max mentioned. I'm a professor of surgery at Stanford and also founder and CEO of an academic startup called Surgical Safety Technologies based in New York City. I'd like to invite the panel that Filippo, Jacopo, and the team here invited to have a discussion here. But please join me, and I think we want to keep it as interactive as possible. We want obviously to give our perspectives, provide some of the our experiences, and respond to some of the questions you may have to see how we can collaboratively move this field forward and see opportunities that hopefully we didn't see before we got together here tonight. So I would like to open it up with and invite every single member of the panel to present themselves and maybe a couple of opening statements around what's your experience with AI, how you use AI, and the question here is how can AI how you see the future of AI to change practice in healthcare, and I hope people will not shy away from any controversial statements, anything deep. We want something deeper than the usual thing we hear in the mainstream media and some of the typical conferences where AI is the future of healthcare and so on. So why don't you start and then we'll open the discussion.
Thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here at this institution. My name is Mahdi Azizian. I'm the Senior Director of Healthcare AI at NVIDIA. The experience that I have gone through is through my past life in robotic surgery, working at Intuitive Surgical, trying to bring AI to the edge of robotic surgery and medical devices. And now at NVIDIA for the past 3.5 years, I've been involved with building NVIDIA WholeScan, which is a edge AI platform for basically real-time sensor processing. With that, obviously, I want to add a question to the topic of this talk here. With the imbalance that we see in research in around medical devices, surgery, and healthcare AI in Europe being much more than what we see in US versus commercial successes not keeping that proportion. That is something that I would love to hear from other panelists of why do you see that and if you agree with this sentiment. Passing it over.
Okay, thank you, Filippo and Jacopo, for inviting me in this panel. I'm a professor of the University of Bologna. I teach I'm a computer vision researcher basically since 30 years. I teach computer vision. I founded the Computer Vision Lab at the University of Bologna, which is a good and active research lab. So I've been on this subject since 30 years. So I've seen like from the initial method that were model-based to all the AI explosion that we see today. Then as a business-wise, I founded a startup in 2020 in which we apply AI in the industry, manufacturing. And that was it's like the best opportunity, I think, for AI in this area because there's so much of manufacturing. But I've been starting some new projects recently with AI in healthcare. And I see this more from the technological perspective. What I could see is that there are a lot of AI techniques that have been invented in the last 3 years or so that are not that much applied in AI for healthcare. And so I see a lot of technology opportunities. Then how this would translate into business, I'm not that sure at the moment. I don't know, because also we have, among the talks that we had today, some of them were like, okay, but what is the case study? Is really helping the surgeon? I heard a speaker say, okay, this is gonna, maybe it was I don't know who it was, but he said, the only person that wouldn't benefit from that is the surgeon. So, I don't know. So maybe we should really focus on the use cases. But that said, if I have to start a new startup, I think I will go in AI for healthcare. So maybe, because I see that the technology is there, we can do much more. Then, as for the business, I think it will be, somewhere there will be, because there is a lot of really new AI models that have been doing so well in other areas and could be applied to the healthcare. Just last word, the problem is the data in healthcare. Because from my small experience, as I said, I'm just starting a few projects, when we talk of data for AI in other areas, we talk of, it's small when it's in the order of tens of thousands, while in AI, it is in the order of the hundreds, oftentimes. So I would say that probably we need also to invest in how to collect data and how to generate data, because this is an option. Generate realistic synthetic data. There's a new technology called diffusion models that are, it's behind all the generators that we see today, video generators, image generators, 3D generation. That is impressive. So could we apply that also to medical data in a reasonable way, in a privacy-preserving way? That would be a lot of data useful. I stop here.
Awesome.
Hi, my name is Steve Thompson. I'm a Vice President of Global Distribution at Intuitive Surgical. I'd love to thank Filippo and Jacopo for having me here today and being able to present or discuss at this meeting this evening at this beautiful facility. In regards, so I've been with Intuitive since 2007, so just almost 18 years. And when we look at AI, and digital surgery, Intuitive is really the systems and the surgeon console, patient side cart, vision tower connected by a cord. We did a surgery actually, I think in 2003 with the surgeon in France, and the surgery being performed actually in New York City. And so when we think of AI and those elements, we're certainly come a long way since then. But yet when I look at the challenges that we have and the value, I think there's huge value. When I see day to day, and for surgeons, the value I see is how they track their data, how they look at outcomes, how surgeons learn the technology. And when you think towards the future, how can this information help surgeons expedite their learning curve as they're using new technology? How can it help them make real-time clinical decisions based on past experiences, not just from them, but from other expert surgeons around the world? What I see as some of the biggest challenges is just speed and making sure you maintain safety. And it's a huge challenge that conflicts with each other in healthcare, because you want to get this information and this technology in the hands of the people to use it to continue to progress, but you have to protect the patient information, right? And you have to make sure that regulations and rules are followed, and these are different from each and every country. And so when you think of the challenges that we have, it's working through that. And I think, to me, it's going to take time, but I think the opportunity is immense, and I think the value, as I just personally see it in ChatGPT and other things, the value is huge. It can be a little scary, but for me, I think it's very exciting. And when I see just the early results with our technology, using some of this early data information, and we're just getting started, I think we have a long, fun road in front of us. So thank you.
Awesome.
Hi, my name is Kiara Ulaki. I am a data protection officer for Pfizer. I work in an industry, pharmaceuticals, which is very highly dependent on patient data and data in general. We're also an industry that is really taking, Pfizer in particular is really using AI in some very innovative methods, both just in terms of its sales and marketing and running its own business, and in terms of drug development. The way that I see this intersection in my personal day-to-day and my work is both at the operationalizing and better understanding the legislative efforts that are happening, that are coming for a global company that's dealing with laws that are being spearheaded by the EU and have to be implemented on a global basis, and having to explain some of these really idealistic and really forward-looking laws that are still kind of being figured out as we go along. And also in counseling and day-to-day with colleagues in my company that really are trying to do things at the forefront of technology while still being in line with current regulatory practices and what's coming on the horizon. I was really excited today and also this evening to hear the level of discussion talking about patient data and privacy protective efforts to kind of ensure that the technology that's being created and that's being spearheaded is being done with patient considerations at the forefront, and I'm really excited to continue this conversation this evening and to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Mark?
Wonderful, thank you. So thanks for inviting me, and happy to be here and share a few thoughts. So I am Mark Parity, Vice President Data Strategy for Northwell Health. Northwell Health is about 21 hospitals going to 28 hospitals in New York State. We are the largest employer in New York State, as well as the largest hospital system in New York State. True sort of integrated IDN. So not only do we have inpatient, outpatient, ambulatory, right? We also have our own labs that we own. We have our own transport, really sort of soup to nuts, our own long-term care facilities, so on and so forth, skilled nursing facilities, and so on. True to my title, data strategy, right? I think the real opportunities are in data, and I'll give you a little bit of a sense of what sorts of things I look at and how I work through it. So I really have four responsibilities. In no particular order, but starting with working with our ventures group, right? We do direct venture investments, joint ventures, data partnerships, data monetization, look at the companies and opportunities in the portfolio from a data science, machine learning, AI, data monetization standpoint. Secondly, I work with Northwell as a whole to think through data strategy, and that's data strategy writ very broadly. So it's not just data, but it's the algorithms that are derived from that data, the applications that are embedded into to hopefully change behavior, which should hopefully lead to better outcomes and therefore net new value on the other end. I have a small team of data engineers, and we've gone and built out a data lakehouse on Databricks. It's got about 5 million lives in it from the last 10 years. It's a mix of EHR data, structured, unstructured, so we've got notes and labs in there as well. We have billing data as well as social determinants of health and patient-reported outcomes and some other things, and we're sort of always layering that in. And then Northwell has recently stood up an AI Center of Excellence that we call the AI Catalyzer, and so I'm part of the leadership team there, where our big initiative is to, or has been so far, to go and set up our own internal ChatGPT, if you will, right? So it's AI Hub. It's a privately hosted, privately tenanted version of the Gemini models, of the Microsoft OpenAI models, Claude, and a couple of others. And what's kind of cool about that is We have a whole separate framework for doing that. It allows us to sort of then block external access, which means we don't have to worry about leakage of IP or PHI or other concerns that come about when people go to the external web for these things. But we've worked in things like tasks and RAG and agent-based frameworks and all of that internally. But then we're also using that same framework to run our own internal innovation forum or innovation challenge, such that whereas before we'd get these 40 or 50-page applications that were just kind of rambling, usually just someone's grant application that they throw into this. And now when someone has an idea, they can come in, they have a conversation, says, so what's your idea, right? And you start a conversation back and forth. Oh, have you thought about the following? Did you know there's 3 companies that are doing something similar? Here are some aspects of the technology that no one appears to be working on. And as it goes through from that innovation standpoint, it helps them develop that idea, work out that idea. And then at the end of it, right, it goes and fills out the form for you, so you can be limited to 250 words for each of the questions. And then after all of that, it can all be graded on the basis of a rubric, right? All done by Gemini, sort of because we're a Google shop, or at least moving towards being a Google shop. So a variety of different things that we're working on and doing there. But all of that is dependent on data, right? If you're not collecting the data, if you're not organizing that data, if you're not making that data available, if you're not connecting the different data assets you have, none of this does much of anything for you. So I would say that all the opportunities are in data, and even where synthetic data, a lot of the conversations earlier today were around how to use synthetic data to train models, and in fact, even you go and look at Strawberry, which is ChatGPT 5, more or less, and Orion, which is ChatGPT 6. It looks like 5 is mostly about generating synthetic data to train 6. You still can't create the synthetic data without the original sort of real-world physics-constrained, process-constrained data to begin with. So I would always urge people to start with the data, look at the data, and think about the data.
Very inspiring. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Excited to be here. Thank you again, Jacopo and Filippo, for inviting us, and honestly for all of you for coming, because this is one of these categories that will take all of us working together to shape. My name is Rachel King. I'm part of the Johnson & Johnson MedTech Digital Organization. Most of you may even know Johnson & Johnson. It's a pretty large healthcare company, plays a role in soft tissue surgery, orthopedics, vision care, cardiac, heart care, and even in innovative medicines. And so we have a pretty a sense of responsibility to really think about how we can make a difference in healthcare. And part of my role in MedTech Digital is to shape the priorities of where we should focus. And I try to keep things simple, which I think about AI as identifying patterns and looking for insights from them. And I think about the end use case and the size of the problem that we can solve. And so some of the things I'm most excited about, I think all of us here can identify as being a patient ourselves, right? And so what if you could harness the patterns of every single patient who had a challenge just like you, and uniquely guiding the pathway to your best outcome, looking at all the other patients who had a similar situation and how their treatment pathway expanded. I think of also the clinicians that care for us, right? In terms of elevating that standard of care, that you're getting the best care if you're in Bologna or if you're in California or in Zimbabwe, that learning curve of the best clinician that you can have is harnessing the knowledge of everyone that has cared for that type of patient. And then I think the other part is around really improving decision-making and efficiency of healthcare systems. We think about the cost of healthcare as a challenge, particularly in the United States where I'm from. But even us as patients, again, waiting for your turn to have care is never a fun proposition, and oftentimes, prolongs a life-saving treatment that you need to have. So those are the kinds of use cases that really excite me. It'll take all of us working together to make it happen. So thanks for being here tonight.
Hello, everybody. Andrew Hung. I'm a urologist and researcher using AI to better understand how surgeons operate in the operating room. And we know that there's tremendous variability in the quality of surgery that's delivered, and that also is reflected in the disparate quality of outcomes for our patients after surgery. And so my team, funded through the National Institutes of Health in the United States, we have about $10 million of active funding now. We're looking at how we can assess the quality in the operating room of surgeons, but also to take that report card of surgeons to then predict patient-reported outcomes. And then the long-term vision, of course, is then with that understanding of the relationship of what happens in the operating room to what happens to the patient, then to be able to deliver the feedback back to the surgeon so that they can change their behavior. And as humans, we are naturally resistant to change, and we're resistant to sometimes critical feedback. And so there's a bit of educational psychology involved of, okay, great, we have these fancy algorithms, AI algorithms, that can assess what is wrong, and then how do you present that in a way that will encourage behavioral change? And so there's a machine-to-human interaction piece there where, you know, no matter how fancy your algorithm is, if it does not have the intended impact on the receiving end, which is a human being, you have not succeeded. And so it doesn't matter how many GPUs it's taken to train these algorithms. In the end, the receiving end, at least in my world, is still a human surgeon, patients as well. And so that's a very critical piece that I've focused on in my research. So happy to be here and excited to hear some questions from you all.
Awesome. That was a great first round, and as you can see there, it's a pretty diverse panel here. People with background in healthcare, with medical background, business background, engineering, representing academic institutions, hospital systems, commercial or device and innovation companies. So as we're going through a discussion, think about questions that could be of interest to you. And I want to start with asking Luigi. Luigi, you mentioned that you've observed some tremendous success stories of European innovation in AI that have resulted in commercialization. Can you share with the group here and maybe inspire the group here?
The success stories, you know, maybe they may not be so tremendous. I was just saying that when you apply AI in the manufacturing sector now, it's gonna grow a lot across many companies and many industries, because when we use AI now to improve the quality of production, while in the past this was really possible only for very controlled situations with low variability, now it's going to be possible for many, many other situations that were considered impossible. It is possible also when you don't have an explicit model of the defects, and that is called anomaly detection. So these are things that all the companies that do AI for quality inspection and process monitoring are starting to introduce, and they are going to provide benefits. And now, this is, if you think a success story like the billion company, it doesn't exist. Because this is also a sector in which bigs are small. There are not, you know, the largest computer vision company in the world is Cognex, which is an American company. I think the market capitalization could be between 1 billion or maybe between 1 billion or 2. So is it a big company? I wouldn't say it's a super big company. So because of the fragmentation of the market, because the applications are so diverse, in the area in which I work most, I see a lot of small, I would say, success stories, companies that are improving their business, and customers that are improving their quality, but with very varied and diversified applications. So I was talking a couple of days ago with a VC, and he said, okay, but in this sector, is there the 1 billion unicorn? I don't see it, no. Because because the most established company is a 2 billion company, so probably. But, you know, there's room to do it. Also, my startup, I don't think it will become a billion company because the market is fragmented. Because if you can do well, you can't get to an addressable market, which is so big because of the diversity of the applications.
You got to visualize it. If you don't visualize it, it's not going to happen.
Okay, let me do it.
So do you visualize?
I did it.
Do you visualize an established industry-leading player like Ferrari to adopt some of the AI methodologies? And does anyone see an opportunity for a partnership between Ferrari and NVIDIA for an autonomous vehicle?
Dan Stoyanov was sitting next to me this morning, and someone, I think it was you or someone else, was showing actually the exchange of tires in a race. Was saying, why can't we do this with humanoids? Why do we need like 16 people around the car to do that? Probably you can actually beat their performance by an automated system. Totally, why not? I think that's an area that should be explored.
There'll be a sad race to watch, though.
That was exactly what I was telling Dan, that it takes the fun out of it.
Yeah, it is fun.
Opportunity wouldn't be definitely autonomous driving, okay? Because I was invited for a talk in Lamborghini, and I didn't know why they wanted to have a talk to me, so I started talking about autonomous driving. They said, who buys a
Get out of
Lamborghini
here.
and wants it to be? So that's not the business. So, okay, so what would you like to do? I don't know, tell us. And so I started to throw some ideas, but now, coming to Ferrari and similar companies, one application could be aesthetic defect detection. They have these tunnels of lights and many people surround, and then a car has to be checked perfectly, and it is a one-shot learning problem because you have one different kind of car, highly personalized. So that could be an application.
Yeah.
Changing tires, I didn't think, but it's cooler, so I give it to you.
So I have a question to Steve and Rachel. You represent companies with multi-billion-dollar market caps, and I assume there are a lot of people here who may have startups in the healthcare domain. Can you share how you see potential for partnership with European startups that bring innovation to the field that you have a strategic interest in? Is it something that you have experience in? Is it something that you see an opportunity in? And can you share a few ideas or your vision that potentially could inspire some people in the room here?
Ladies first.
For sure. So we are recently in the past year have sort of reimagined our approach to digital, and actually it was a theme of the conference we're at around sort of open versus closed ecosystems. And we have decided to pursue more of an open ecosystem with the point I made earlier around the importance of collaboration. And one of the things about J&J where it's large, we're not always fast. We're trying to be better. But the open ecosystem approach allows us to scale really amazing technology that is available. And so we think about ultimately solutions we can provide, but two kind of ingredients that go to that is creating a kind of a studio where we can offer up data sets for other innovators to build algorithms is another way to scale technology, and then sort of having more of a marketplace of applications that don't need to be made by Johnson & Johnson, but could be made by other third parties that could be available on the platform. And that allows us still to combine data sources to be able to inform future decisions, but also creates a more streamlined user experience for the end user. It's not multiple logins to 25 different companies. It's a common platform that can enable all of that. So that's sort of our new approach. And so, yeah, if there's anybody here who has a cool technology and wants to talk, we would love to collaborate either on algorithm development or in technology scaling. So we'd love to talk more.
Great. I think that's a great thought. From our perspective as an organization, you know, the way we typically look at technology, you know, the Da Vinci system, which is our primary product, and we've launched a few other platforms, I always describe we're an inch wide and a mile deep. And what we're always looking for is trying to figure out how to continue to make this technology more valuable to the surgeons that utilize it so that they can get better outcomes. And so when I think of how we started to apply data, we capture a lot of information on the system. And so now we're able to start to extrapolate this information and allow to provide it to track this data, to find ways of how do we improve this. And so we try to create a circle where we capture the data, we give that information to surgeons, and then they're able to go and take that technology, for example, on a simulator, and then practice, right? So they're practicing in a safe environment, and they're allowed to continue to improve and hopefully accelerate their learning curve so that the technology feels like breathing in the OR. And so when we look at bringing new things in, as an organization, we have a department that looks at this. We have multiple people that validates this type of technology. And so we work with a lot of different people. We have engineers, thousands of engineers that constantly work on their own projects as well that we validate. And when we think of where does it fit, does it fit into our mission of what we're trying to accomplish and how do we fit it in, and where is it from a forward-looking standpoint of where we want to go, because sometimes the road isn't clearly paved. But of course, we would definitely look at new technologies, and we're always looking for partners of how can we continue to add to our mission and continue to really bring the technology and minimally invasive surgery to more patients that get them home quicker. And when we think of the mission, that's our mission.
So those in the room who have early stage startups, what should they try to visualize, a partnership or M&A?
What I would visualize is, if you want to understand where our business and business set is, you're welcome to always talk to customers. There's always a lot of patients out there, but look at where can you add value, and where can you add value to what we're striving for. It's simply put, our mission statement's right on our website, and for us, if you have interest, you can always reach out to me. If there's people you want to talk to, I always forward the people on, and we'll tell you pretty clearly and succinctly where we may see it fit and where we may see it not. But we're big on collaboration. We're an engineering-driven company. The engineers, we're very fortunate to have amazing people who have built amazing technology, and so this is also a way for networking and getting to know more people around the world that have interesting ideas that maybe we haven't thought of. So absolutely.
Yeah. How about you, Rachel?
Yeah, I think there's not one size fits all. I think, historically it was to buy or not to buy. I think there's so many other creative partnership strategies now, whether it's co-creation, even sharing intellectual property, whether it's a distribution agreement. So I think it's more about kind of how do you create shared value, and maybe what's the win-win in both sides of the situation, and how do you really scale the technology to reach most patients in the successful way. Yeah. So I think it depends, but a lot of options now.
So can you visualize an Intuitive app on the J&J App Store or J&J app on the Intuitive App Store?
Actually, we have a partnership with J&J. We use some of their instrumentation, so absolutely. That's certainly a possibility.
Yeah. And some of our video capture software captures robotic surgery videos. So yeah, I think it's about the greater good.
Awesome. So Chiara, it's a really interesting field you're in, and I don't know where you're based. Are you based in Europe or in the U.S.?
International assignment in Milan, but I'm originally based in New York headquarters.
Okay, awesome. So I guess you've seen both the European environment and the U.S. environment, and I saw somewhere not too long ago on LinkedIn that a statement that U.S. innovates and China replicates and Europe regulates. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
I disagree with that statement.
Yeah?
I think that there's all three, although in each of the three in geographic areas. I think that actually it's a benefit. The European regulation approach, there's some companies that view it as a negative because they say the cost of compliance is too high. I think it really depends. In some industry, I think it's actually a benefit because European regulation ends up setting the standard. And if you comply with European regulation, you're really 1 foot in the right direction in terms of being able to operate on a global level. You're just there ahead of the game.
Yes. Anyone else have any comments?
I would just say China innovates a lot.
Yeah.
It's no longer the China replicates. All the areas in which I work, now China is leading innovation. If you see the top conferences, the best papers, the number of papers are from Chinese universities. So definitely no longer replicating. They are at the forefront of research.
Yeah.
They're also regulating.
That's what I can say for sure.
They're also regulating.
They're also regulating. They have some very strict regulation in terms of how it's enforced. It really depends. It's cultural, but I think that's also in Europe. It's not every company that's being targeted by the regulators in Europe. It's specific. I think that how you present yourself and what your intentions are, especially in this space when you're talking about consumer protection and patient privacy and just consumer data generally, how you present yourself and how you're framing your security standards for how you're handling data, what you're saying publicly about what commitments you're making in terms of handling privacy. I think it's really important in terms of how regulators look at you and what kind of story you're telling in terms of your relationship with consumers on a larger scale.
Yeah. I wonder how it is from your from NVIDIA, J&J, Intuitive point of view. Do you feel that European legislation around data protection and a bunch of other regulatory mechanisms inhibit innovation for your teams? I assume you've got teams in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, I wouldn't want to say inhibit, because I would say it is certainly longer and more cumbersome for us from our perspective. It could be partly that we are a heavily US-based organization, so it could be the lack of familiarity, but we have an excellent team around the world. You know, we have offices based in Europe, and because you have different regulations for getting data out there and data sharing and concerns that are legitimate, there's just more rules and hurdles that we have to jump. And so we actually have to train our teams in Europe differently than we train them in the US and so on for Japan. But I would say from my personal experience, yeah, the timeline to getting it to the customer is longer, for sure. I would argue it was shorter a few years ago, but it has gotten extensively longer. And when you talk, just to comment on China, China is one of the longest. So they're heavy on regulation. So completely different pathway, completely different process. And again, you know, totally different cultural environment as well. But Europe is certainly a long tail.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would add about China is that there's a lot of public-private collaboration, and that also puts foreign companies at more of a disadvantage because they don't have the relationships. I mean, when we are doing anything new in China, it's a huge negotiation discussion about our overall strategy. Pfizer has a big presence in China, and we continue to do so, even though a lot of companies have left certain markets. And it's a commitment to just understanding, I don't know, it's a different kind of commitment. I'm not a business person, I'm a lawyer, but I still think that it's really impressive, the kind of continuing conversation with regulators and better understanding local requirements and some respect for local culture.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was
Maddie,
gonna,
Rachel, yeah.
yeah, I was going to say there definitely are some barriers. I think it's about kind of continuing the education and reimagining possibilities. There, like you said, are good regulation for good reason, but even some of the like infrastructure, like cloud-based infrastructure, there's a lot, like we're focused a lot on surgical video as one of the inputs, and putting, you know, there's probably more receptivity to putting your banking information in the cloud than there is healthcare data. So how do we potentially learn from other industries of how we could evolve that? Even if you're tracking surgical video, you're looking at people, right? And so can we de-identify that data to make people feel more comfortable? But there's definitely work to do to kind of definitely provide that privacy and protection, but in a way that can still identify patterns to be able to improve standard of care. So we have work to do. I think it is a little slow now, but it's not, you're not alone. I mean, I think there's an educational and upskilling opportunity across the board. I think Mark was talking about that even within his own hospital system. That's why I mentioned all of us here, even as patients, being more comfortable with sharing our information for how it would benefit us as individuals is something we all can be part of shaping and improving legislation and regulations.
One thing I might add too, that you think about again, the regulation's important, but the challenge sometimes it puts extra pressure on startup companies, especially smaller companies. The cost to survive and the cost of money to get something to market that may be hugely valuable. I think a question always to ask is how many good ideas have been lost because they couldn't get it to commercialization because of the long tail of regulation that doesn't allow them to recover their seed money or allow them to get their feet under them, right, and get going. And I think that's always a big debate where, you know, you look at, we have a lot of robotics players, and you see some already exiting the market because of the time it takes to get to market and the cost to do business, especially in a healthcare environment where, you know, U.S. has very difficult regulations for drug companies and medical device companies. And when you take that component and make it even harder in other countries and other continents, it really becomes a challenge to be successful. It has to be an amazing idea. And I think as somebody as a startup, you know, that's always a big challenge of how do you make it to the certain point of threshold to be successful.
Yeah. Mario, do you have any, are you facing any of these challenges?
Sure. We have a saying at NVIDIA, it's called AMAN, ALAP, as much as needed, as little as possible. That applies to regulations as well, as much as needed, as little as possible. Obviously, you can actually fall on either side of those, but often, as you mentioned, EU is innovating and ahead in the regulation game. And the good thing, I mean, the basically half full side of the glass is if you actually comply to GDPR, mostly you're going to be okay in the rest of the world. Yeah. But obviously, it's the higher bar often earlier than the rest of the world.
One thing, I agree for sure. But I also think that it's taken a long time to understand how to operationalize GDPR for companies. And I think that now with new legislation that's coming, with the EU AI Act and EHDS in Europe, it's going to be another steep hill to climb in terms of understanding how to operationalize some of these requirements. Again, that being said, if you bake in some of these concepts on the front end when you're creating your company, you're kind of thinking about consumer protection and some of the other fundamental rights that European regulation tries to target, that is very consistent across multiple legislation, I think you're putting yourself in a really good position generally.
Awesome. Mark, it was really interesting to hear some of the work that you've been doing at Northwell. And for those of you who don't know Northwell, we've been doing a lot of work with Northwell, one of the largest, the largest healthcare system in New York State and one of the largest in the country. And I can imagine that that gives tremendous opportunities to create a unique data warehouse. So how do you generate value out of this, the data warehouse? Do you envision that some in-house developed application to benefit your physicians and patients? Do you envision it through collaborations with existing players or startups? Well, what is the strategy?
No, it's a great question. So if you'd asked me that question 6 months ago, I would have said it was that we would be creating our own applications, right, our own algorithms, and we'd be going out into the world on our own. As I've watched the market more and more and just kind of thought through where and how algorithms should be deployed and who should bear the risk for those algorithms and what are the core competencies of a health system versus the core competencies of a startup or a software company, really the logical place for these algorithms to live is either in your EHR or it's going to be living in your cloud platform, right? Because there's going to be next to the data and the AI and the scalability and the computer all going to be in one place. And to the extent that it's in the EHR, that makes the most sense, right? Because that's also in your workflow, right? And it doesn't matter. You can build the best, most beautiful, most impactful AI application in the world, but if it's never adopted, right? If it never finds its way into the workflow, it's just a waste of money and time, basically. So now I'm focusing much more, and we've had this track for a couple of years and been trying to work with companies to do this, but it's what I call a marquee partnership, wherein we're looking for companies that really want to reimagine, redesign, rework healthcare from the ground up, think about entirely new ways of delivering care, and then work with those folks, right, and give them access to what are our core differentiable and defensible assets, which is the healthcare delivery platform, that integrated healthcare delivery platform, and then the physics-constrained, process-constrained real-world data that creates, right? Because it's that data, right, that's going to be used to generate those algorithms, and it's going to be that healthcare delivery platform that's going to be used to test and validate the impact of them, and then, of course, it generates a nice virtuous cycle, right? That as that works, new data is created, and it goes round and round. So it's much more what I would consider to be indirect monetization, right, of these types of data assets, whereas before I was looking for a much more direct form of it.
And what returns the value to the enterprise? Is it the improvements in care? Is it through the relationship with third parties? Or how does the enterprise see the value of your team?
This is a nice practice for budget season, which begins next week. I'm going to get asked that question. It's a really challenging question in many ways, right? So there's one aspect of data that leadership already buys into, right? They need to run reports. They need to meet regulatory requirements, right? They need to be able to put together a financial plan. And so data for all of that sort of retrospective data warehousing type of work, they understand that. They recognize the need for it. Even to some extent, sort of research data sets, research data marts, surgery data marts, these sorts of things, again, recognize the value of those. One of the big challenges that I have, and it's a significant education, re-education problem, is helping leadership understand most of the value here is soft, right? And I can't tell you exactly when that value is going to be returned, right? It's very much like R&D. So this isn't a cost-cutting exercise. This is not a regulatory exercise. This is an exercise in discovery, right? We're building out these data assets. We're doing this type of work. We're trying to find these marquee partners to work with because, this is going to be the next, the next Sony Walkman. Some people in the room are old enough to remember that, right? Or sort of the next smartphone, right? The next big thing that's going to sort of allow us to really redesign and rework that. And so it's challenging, right? So I was telling some people about a deal that I had negotiated a couple of years ago where for about, when it was based on, we'd had the product in-house, we had a year's worth of our own data, we'd done pilots with it. It was going to cost us about $4 million, which was, sort of all in to put it in, which was at like an 85 or 90% discount from their list prices. All of our models said it was going to be a $14 million return. We were going to get equity in the company. We were going to co-develop and co-create, get access to all their products. Like, to me, it was a no-brainer, right? Yeah. But then when it came time to where's that $4 million going to come from, right? Whose budget is that going to come out of? Who's going to go on the hook for that $14 million at the end of the year, right? Because our COO and our CFO are going to write $14 million into the budget next year. Everybody ran for the hills, right? Even the people who were the heads of the departments who had done the POCs who were excited about this. And it's because they have no gut sense or intuition for it, right? If I had said, I need $4 million for a new MRI and I'm going to make $14 million, like, I wouldn't have finished the sentence before they'd said, here's your MRI, go do it, right? Because they've done that a million times. They understand how to do it. There's an intuition, there's a belief that that's going to generate return. People have yet to see the real returns in AI, especially at the leadership level. And so you have to find people who believe, right? You have to find sort of the zealots, if you will, right? Who are willing to persevere in the face of great adversity. But it's a pursuit that's worth doing, right? And I think we all know healthcare is not what it should be, right? It is a substandard experience for everybody, everywhere. And we could be doing a lot better, and the way that we're going to be able to do a lot better is with these technologies.
Yeah. And who can get access to these data assets? Now we're in Europe. I'm sure that there are a lot of scientists, startup founders, and so on who feel that partnership like that could be a tremendous value to them. Is there a mechanism to work with third parties like that?
So yes, but it is, as we all know, very, very heavily regulated, right? And you have to be very, very careful in this space, right? And so it's very important to, first of all, state, right? There is nothing more sacred to the health system than our patients' data, right? Yeah. And that data is not released, it is not sold, it is not sent out to the world willy-nilly, right? It is only in very specific context, limited data sets for specific purposes, in specific contexts, de-identified whenever, wherever possible, looking a lot into synthetic data as another way to do this. And there always has to be some direct benefit back to the patients, and as often as possible, direct consent given. But with all of that as a background, right, there are ways to go and make the data accessible, especially in these marquee partnerships, right? So when we build these partnerships, essentially the partner on the other side becomes an extension of the healthcare system. And so it's no different than if we as a health system decided we're going to do this, we're going to hire a bunch of people, we're going to start working on this particular project. And so for the data that is required and necessary as part of that particular project, right, we can find ways that are ethically appropriate, legally appropriate, regulatorily appropriate to share that data for those purposes. It's not easy, but it can be done.
Yeah, amazing opportunities, and we certainly are excited about working with the Northwell team. Andrew, some of the work that you've done in the past few years is it really opens up tremendous opportunities to change the way not only how we educate surgeons, but also the way we continuously improve as a profession. You've developed new concepts, you developed new algorithms, you've validated them, you've published in the top journals, presented everywhere around the world. So what's next? What is exciting next frontier for you?
You know, FedEx, Amazon, UPS, these are companies that deliver packages all around the world, and they've got their hubs, and they can ship things to the regional hubs, but their biggest challenge is that final mile or kilometer where your product is so close but it hasn't touched its customer and it hasn't delivered that impact. And I think that's, many millions of dollars of funding, later, and papers in Nature and so forth, and JAMA is fantastic, but there's that sense of emptiness inside, and it's really about that impact to whether it's a patient or a customer, whoever it is, right? So that beautiful idea is not fulfilled unless it's really touched the end user, and that's really where the commercial side of things is. That's that unique partnership, I think, that folks can have, whether you're an academic or you're in industry. I think that is that unique relationship where you can, conquer that final mile or kilometer challenge. And so I think that's my next journey, is to discover how do you get that package from the regional hub, wherever that may be, to the doorstep, figuratively, and that's going to be the greatest challenge. I do want to also touch on what Mark was saying about, data. I think, particularly with AI and with machine learning, you have to have generalizable models. I study how surgeons operate and how they behave, but if my models will only work for the patients at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, and it does not work for UCLA or USC or our wonderful doctors here in Bologna, it's useless. And so, but the only way to learn from data elsewhere is to have forged these partnerships and to be able to share that data. And yet something as sensitive as surgical videos is just tremendously challenging, and I think, but we do have to conquer those challenges if we're going to be able to, use these algorithms to help not just folks in one geographical region. We're a very global environment, so I think that's a challenge that's still worth fighting for, because ultimately that's going to speak to the success of what we do.
Yeah, very much agreed. And I do just want to make one quick comment on the last mile or the last 1.6 kilometer problem. So this is a real problem we see all the time, right, in academia, right? People have a great idea, they'll go out and they'll do all this work, they'll build an amazing model, maybe you deploy it on a floor or a wing, right, but it never goes beyond that. And quite often that's because the origin of the idea was in someone's head, right? It's a great place for an idea to begin, but it was not a particular problem that anyone was necessarily experiencing on the floor. It was not a concrete use case. And then once they actually started to go and build that algorithm or build that work, they didn't go to the doctors and the clinicians and the nurses and the patients and say, well, so let's just imagine we had an algorithm that could do X and it was right 99% of the time. Where in the workflow would you want that to exist, right? What information would you need to change your mind, to make an alternate decision, right? Because there's a lot of algorithms that get built and put out there where the clinicians say, yeah, duh, right? That's the decision I would have made, right? It's not helpful, right? To be thinking about, well, okay, what does the addressable market look like? Is this a problem just at Cedars-Sinai or Northwell, or is this a generalizable problem that exists in a lot of places? And by asking those questions up front and early, it actually informs what types of models you use. It informs what types of data you collect. It informs everything you do every step of the way. And it's this sort of mantra that exists in the product management world about begin with the end in mind, right? So very early on, if you have any thought about commercializing, you want to be thinking, and actually another good point as well, which is you wouldn't necessarily think of, but so you do the academic work, you're super excited about it, you put it in an abstract, you publish it, or you put it in a paper, you publish it. Well, guess what? Now it's public information and you can't protect it with IP anymore. You can't patent it. Right? So you have to, doesn't mean you can't disclose the work that you've done, but you have to work with your IP attorneys, right? To make sure that what you put out into the public forum is not going to give away your IP rights down the line. And so that's why you want to bring in, if you have any interest in commercializing, and it's fine to do stuff just for academic sake or just for the expansion of knowledge, no judgment one way or another, but if you're at all interested in the commercialization side of things, bring the commercial people in early. Bring the people who are going to use the product in early. Bring the people who are going to be affected by the product in early. And also, last point to also think about, make sure you've got a revenue model, right? So this is enormously important in the US. A lot of great ideas, but if it doesn't have a CPT code, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, right? I can't put it in.
Yeah, and I want to build on that, and I'm sure since the theme here is everyone here went to business school here likely, this is a concept very near and dear to my heart. I might have mentioned in my intro that I'm an engineer turned strategist for very much this reason. I was big on finding a problem and then a technology solution. I thought, oh, I'm going to be out there saving lives, but a lot of them never got to market, and that frustrated me. And so I went to business school, like a lot of you, and I'm sure you've all learned about the importance of making a business case and doing market research, right? And I, again, think of things very simply in terms of prioritization of like how big is this problem, which can be a combination of the complication cost that it creates or how many patients have that problem. And it's also a degree of how many other alternatives are there that can solve that problem. It kind of gives you that radar of how big is this opportunity. And then the other index, like your x-axis, is like your speed to impact it. And so it's like, what's the technology feasibility of this idea? Do you have a commercial model to scale it? Is there reimbursement? Those are all the barriers. And so that's kind of how we try to work through prioritization. But I've kind of taken marketing unfortunately gets the bad rap of being really soft and fluffy, but I think there's a ton of opportunity to bring science to it, really understanding likelihood to adopt and willingness to pay for a new idea. That totally factors into your business model. And one of the things I think that's really fun and challenging around this new topic is that when you're, it used to be if you're developing, let's say, a device or you have a pen or pencil, okay, now it's going to rotate 30 degrees. You can give pretty good feedback whether you'd like to use that or not. But when you're talking about new ways that information is going to be exchanged, it changes the way that you collaborate with other people, the way that you make decisions. It impacts your workflow. And it's actually really hard to imagine that. So we've tried to embody, yes, do your classical ways to build a hypothesis, but then go through experiential learning. If you can create an environment to simulate what that would be like, or you can do a beta evaluation in a real-world hospital, you start to increase the receptivity of somebody actually be able to give you meaningful feedback on a very transformational concept. So thought you guys would appreciate that as business leaders, also trying to identify which innovations are likely to be successful. And I try to tell all the engineers I work with, I hope nothing you ever work on sits on the shelf, because that would be a waste of all of our time. But that combination of commercial, clinical, and technical is usually the secret sauce that has to work together to do that business case evaluation. The other part is fail fast. So have very clear goals of what you're trying to demonstrate in that business case. What's the fastest way to test that? And if it doesn't prove out, then start the next thing. So those are some lessons learned.
Yeah. So I just want to say one quick comment about fail fast, because I don't know how many of you have ever stood in a boardroom and say, we need to fail fast, and seen how that goes over. Welcome. It's not gone over well in my experience. So instead, what I say is we need to learn lean, right? Exactly the same concept, but now it sounds great, right? Right. So learning, we want to learn, of course, we're moving forward. And lean, that sounds fantastic. That sounds cheap, right? Let's go ahead and do that. So the point is not to say don't fail fast, but words matter, right? And words that make a lot of sense in a software development context or words that make a lot of sense in an academic context might kill you in the boardroom. So pay attention to the language that you're using.
You just have to add the word AI, and I think you'll survive a little longer. But I think ultimately, you gotta get to the market. Ultimately, somebody needs to pay for it. Otherwise, that's a good sign that it's time to take it behind the barn and shoot it. I think we have about 10 minutes left. I think we should give the audience an opportunity to ask any questions. Yeah, go ahead. I think there is a microphone there.
Thank you. Hopefully a quick question. I'm curious, especially from Chiara and Rachel, as I am a lawyer, a bit of an outsider here. How is it feasible from a business perspective, leaving aside marketing, obviously, to anonymize data in order to use it? Is it feasible, or is it just a theoretical thing, but you actually need the personal data? Obviously, taking into consideration that this data cannot be de-anonymized otherwise. Yeah.
We were just talking about this before this. Do you want to start?
So I think that this gap of, thank you, Gerardo, for your question. I think this gap of not having a common anonymization standard is actually a real barrier to interoperability of systems. And I think that expert determinations and putting together data sets is extremely expensive to maintain anonymity. I view this as a great opportunity actually for regulation and for input, and I think that there are standards that are forthcoming from the European institutions on anonymization. I think that there are limits to what you can accomplish with anonymized data. That being said, it's always, I'm a privacy lawyer, so I'm going to say it's always in your interest to use anonymized data, but I think that it's really a barrier, the fact that we don't have a common standard. And I think that the fact that every company and every institution is doing it on a different level, and then maybe applying different standards for data that they're using internally versus data that they're sharing externally, creates a lot of issues and problems in the long term. And additionally, once you anonymize data, you remove yourself from a lot of legislation and regulation. So you're actually putting yourself in a much safer space, and you're able to do a lot more. But in Europe, you still require a legal basis for anonymization. So it's for health data, for scientific data, there's still in theory a barrier. Whether you choose to follow that or take a more risk-based approach and anonymize, because the spirit of GDPR is to kind of rely on as much anonymous data as possible, it's really up to each company or institution, but I'm really supportive of anonymization and finding some forthcoming standards that we can all kind of align to.
Is there anything coming on the?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's been a while, we've been waiting, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. We're trying to start like kind of that speed of impact. Where can you de-identify data? So even at the conference we were all at, there's a lot of de-identification of video algorithms that are created when you're like out of the patient's body versus the laparoscope. NVIDIA builds technology for that. And then slowly start to penetrate more data sets, because once you get into the electronic medical record, that obviously is identified, but can you like link the data inside of the hospital and then de-identify it when it leaves? Part of what we talk about with our privacy attorneys of who owns the data, right? That's a big topic. And oftentimes we're trying to at least build partnerships where we can have secondary data rights, which are more to be able to build algorithms from, but then leave the ownership with the primary hospital. So I think we're starting to get there. But I think I'm hoping that the more we prove out the value of some of that initial start small, then it will start to make people feel more confident and build from there.
Just one thing I want to throw in there, though. I think most of the value that we want to achieve from data and AI, it has to be actual PHI. I think it has to be identified data, and I think we have to work on it. And I think there's a lot of gray areas here and separate legislation to go along with it. But just think about something like DNA, right? Your genomic sequence, right? There's nothing more personalized than that, right? That is you. So can we never use that data, right? And if I can't take real genomic sequences and be treating off that, right? Or again, just even thinking about the actual process of care and how data is coming off the machines, and if the algorithm has to be sitting there at the point in time of care, you can't take an anonymized version of it to feed into the algorithm, because the algorithm's been trained on anonymized data and doesn't understand the PHI, right? So you have these types of things as well. So it's something I think as a society we actually need to have some grown-up conversations around and recognize the value that can come from it. And of course, I think the easiest way out of it is what I end up sort of calling consent, or consumer-driven consent, right? Where basically people are going to create apps, right? And people are going to go and sign over access to that app, right? And that app is now going to have full access to their genomic data, right? Their healthcare data, right? Maybe what they're buying from Amazon, what they ate for dinner last night. And the reason you're going to give all that information over is because in return, you're going to get Dr. ChatGPT, right? Who's going to be sitting there whispering in your ear, right? Who's going to know you better than anyone has ever known you in your life, right? And is not only helping you with the healthcare part of your life, but is helping you with the scheduling part of your life, is helping with you with every part of your life, almost like this digital friend or digital assistant. And when you realize you could have care at that kind of a level, right? As opposed to I have to go and talk to my PCP to go and get a referral, and then I have to get the referral and wait for the referral, and then maybe they misdiagnose me and I have to go, right? Like, it's a nightmare.
Awesome. I think there was another question there and then another there.
Thank you very much. I am a physician. I think we all agree that artificial intelligence could be very useful in management of big data. We are working in China, and so I want a question today. I am addressing a question to Stefano also. On preventive and predictive cardiology and preventive and predictive oncology. The problem of global health, which is a major issue we are facing here in this school also, is that we have also population health, which make differences between Chinese and other population and Caucasian population. For example, as you know, the same adenocarcinoma of the lung has different genetic mutation in the Chinese population toward Caucasian. The same is for IGRAN, for cerebellar atrophy. The same is for BRC, the markers for breast cancer. In African women, they don't work as a genetic marker. They have different genetic marker. So we need to have population health. And population health means that anyway we have to work with very big amount of data. Artificial intelligence could be very useful for pharmaceutical companies, for surgical industries, and also for politicians to plan the future. The problem in China, Stefano, is that, as you know, they are very advanced. They use artificial intelligence to manage smart cities. So we accepted their idea to work on healthy city, healthy China, the one they presented in Davos. But at the same time, they have some resistance to genetic stratification of patients. And in China, the clinical data of the patient belong to the state. They don't belong to the patient. So let us do our clinical and let us do our population health with collecting our data on different population, European, Caucasian, Italian, African population, and then we can compare them with China. So my feeling is to be cautious as our Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs is doing in China, and our Minister of University and Research. But nevertheless, we need to do this kind of comparison between population health in different countries, in different continents, in the approach to global health, which is the future for everybody, for industry, for politicians, and for physicians also. Thank you. If you want to comment. Also, I like the comment of the President of Intuitive Surgical, because we have a request from African countries, but they say that Intuitive Surgical doesn't work with Algeria. They can pay for a robotic surgery. I explained to them, Dr. Thompson, that they should go through a laparoscopic surgery before, because robotic surgery is indicated for prostatectomy in prostate cancer, is accepted for everybody. So they should go to minor surgery, bioptic surgery, laparoscopic surgery, and then they can buy an Intuitive Surgical from AB Italian, and they have the money, but they don't have the knowledge to manage very advanced technology like the robotic surgery technology. Thank you, sorry.
So a couple questions in there, I think. Yes, I don't think AB Medica is going to cover Africa anytime soon. But to your comment on population health, what I can speak to is I agree with you. One of the things that we look at, you're familiar with the quadruple aim. That's our mission that drives our product strategy. We added one area, and it's called quintuple aim. And that's about patient access. And so we work really hard to work with the public institutions to try to address those quadrants so that all patients have access to, we want to make sure that they have access to Da Vinci, but the reality is we want the surgeons, and we talk about reimbursement from a hospital and governments. How do we accomplish that so that there's a reasonable reimbursement for all patients, so that the surgeon, rather than, we have cost pay environments where the patient has to pay for surgery, right? So this is for new technologies, and I'll use Korea as an example. Most of their new technologies is a patient pay, where they pay an extra fee. And a lot of times those institutions actually make a good ROI in some of this technology, so they actually don't want reimbursement because it may be lower. And so for us, what we try to do is help cross that chasm to allow that the surgeon is not selling the technology and why they would choose one over the other, but instead, and then asking them for a fee, instead making sure that they have a level of reimbursement, whether it's open, laparoscopic, robotic, whatever, and then they can focus on what is the best treatment for that patient. And so that's an area where we're making progress. We're making progress in Australia, we're making progress in ASEAN, we're making a lot of progress in Brazil and Mexico, where we have these high cost environments, and it takes time. It takes time because we have to get into the Ministry of Health institutions a lot of times and show the value to these high government decision-making officials. Also, we run into issues where there's government change. So if you get it into these Ministry of Health institutions, they see high value. You have a political election, they change the people in charge, you have to start back at ground zero. So these are some of the things we are making progress on. The second question you asked about is entering new markets. I can tell you that I would love to be in every market. Now, I can't speak for Gary. That's the CEO of Intuitive, but I would tell you I would love to be in every market. The reality is, for us as an organization, being an inch wide and a mile deep, it's hard for us to be everywhere right now. We have to be able to support it. We have to be able to train the surgeons. We have to manage the regulatory environments of all these different markets. And then there's other elements that, frankly, that I've learned about so there's certain countries in Africa, frankly, that don't have sterile processing, right? So you need sterile processing, you need proper anesthesia, you need proper surgical assistance before you can consider laparoscopic surgery, let alone robotic surgery. And so we have a foundation that actually works with African countries where we are starting to help develop these elements. And then we've actually placed a system for practice and training, and not training, but just hands-on experience in Rwanda to start to develop these ideas. But this is a multi-year item for these markets. And so our challenge is we want to make sure that we can serve the markets we're in perfectly, and well, and give them all the tools, which we still can't today. And before we start to rapidly expand to markets where then we start to not serve our current markets very well. And so that's a challenge we face. I suspect J&J probably runs into that as well. I don't know about Pfizer, but those are some of the things and how we look at it is we want to make sure that we grow responsibly and that we don't come in 50%, but that when we go in, we're there for the long term and that we are going to do everything we can to drive that patient access and drive health equity.
Cool. I think there is one more question there, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, thank you everybody for this conversation. I used to work for a health insurance company for a long time, and we discussed like how can we make the insurance like more accessible for more people, because we wanted to grow as with members, and we say, okay, why don't we make it like cheaper, or like we reduce the expenses on this, and like what can we do? Like why don't we keep better? Like we better keep people health instead of like healing people, and like I want to know like any of you if you have any project or interesting project regarding to like preventing or early diagnosis. Because I think the most important thing is like to keep people health in a good health instead of like trying to develop the technology to heal people. So that's my open question to any of you.
Yeah, I don't know whether anyone on the panel wants to take this question. This is a much broader philosophical question that involves a different. Probably will involve a different panel that could answer it better. I don't know whether anyone has any thoughts about that.
Well, I mean, you know, AI can be utilized, let's say, in radiology, which is a pre-treatment sort of situation where you can potentially detect cancers early on, so that, you know, before they have spread, before they have caused, you know, bodily harm in a way that it's now outside of cure, but more of control. So that's perhaps one very specific environment, especially utilizing AI models. In medicine, I think radiology is probably one of the most advanced and developed, is these algorithms that can detect things that are either precancerous or early stages of cancer that would have otherwise been missed by human radiologists. And so I don't know if that addresses, you know, wellness in that way, but that's, you know, certainly an area of major focus and development.
Yeah, that could be a great topic for another evening here at the Bologna Business School. But 7 o'clock now. I'd like to thank all the panelists for some awesome contributions, all of you for coming here. Again, the Filicori brothers for bringing us all together, and Max and Samantha and Alessandro and the Bologna Business School team for being such amazing hosts as always. Thank you. Yeah.